Currency debasement, the hidden theft. Inflation. Currency debasement, when governments lower the value of their own money, is not new. It's an ancient trick that rulers and governments have used to rob their citizens while distracting them with political theater. Today, we'll explore how the US currently debases its currency, then take a journey through history, from ancient Rome to the Federal Reserve, uncovering how governments have used this tactic for centuries to fund their operations while quietly stealing wealth from their citizens. The United States and modern currency debasement. The US government uses inflation as a hidden tax, debasing the currency year after year. But how does this work? It starts with the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States. The Fed has the power to print money and control the money supply, ostensibly to stabilize the economy. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes, it borrows money from the Federal Reserve, which in turn prints more money. Printing more money creates inflation. When more dollars are chasing the same amount of goods, the value of those dollars drops. This is currency debasement in action. While your paycheck may stay the same, your money loses its purchasing power over time. The cost of living rises, and in essence, you're being taxed without even realizing it. But how did we get here? Why does the government resort to inflation to fund itself? To understand that, we need to look back in time to where it all began. Ancient Rome, the birthplace of currency debasement. The Roman Empire was one of the first civilizations to master the art of currency debasement. In the early years of Rome, the denarius, Rome's silver coin, was made almost entirely of silver, 95% or more. However, as the empire grew, so did its expenses. Military campaigns, public works, and the lavish lifestyles of the emperors drained the treasury. Emperor Nero, who ruled from 54 to 68 AD, started the practice of debasing the currency. He reduced the silver content of the denarius to about 90%. This allowed the Roman government to mint more coins with the same amount of silver. Subsequent emperors continued the practice, reducing the silver content further and further. By the time of Emperor Caracalla in the 3rd century AD, the denarius contained only 50% silver. By the fall of the Roman Empire, the silver content was less than 5%. This constant debasement led to rampant inflation in the empire. Prices skyrocketed, and Roman citizens found it harder and harder to afford basic goods. Sound familiar? Currency debasement. Through the ages, medieval Europe followed Rome's lead. Kings frequently debased their currencies to finance wars or fund extravagant lifestyles. By reducing the metal content in their coins, rulers could mint more money, but the result was the same: inflation and a loss of confidence in the currency. Over time, debased money leads to economic collapse, as it did in Rome and various kingdoms in Europe. One of the most notorious examples of currency debasement in more modern history is Weimar Germany after World War I. Facing enormous reparations payments, the German government resorted to hyperinflation, printing more money until it became worthless. By 1923, it took trillions of marks to buy a single loaf of bread. The Federal Reserve and the removal of gold and silver fast forward to the 20th century. The US dollar was once backed by gold and silver, meaning you could trade your dollars for real, tangible assets. But over time, the US government began removing these precious metals from the currency, allowing them to print more money without backing it by anything of real value. 1933. Gold confiscation. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the U.S. government made it illegal for private citizens to own large amounts of gold. The government bought the gold from citizens at a fixed price and then promptly raised the price of gold, effectively devaluing the dollar. The goal was to allow the government to print more dollars without having to back them with gold. 1965. Silver removed from coins. Up until 1964, U.S. coins like dimes, quarters, and half dollars were made primarily of silver. But in 1965, the U.S. stopped minting silver coins, replacing the metal with cheaper materials like copper and nickel. This was another step toward currency debasement, making coins less valuable while allowing the government to produce more of them. 1971. Nixon ends the gold standard. The final blow came in 1971, when President Richard Nixon severed the US dollar's last ties to the gold standard. Until that point, foreign governments could still exchange their US dollars for gold. Nixon's decision ended that practice, allowing the Federal Reserve to print as much money as it wanted without having to back it with any real assets. From that point on, the US dollar became a fiat currency, backed only by the government's promise. Since then, the US dollar has steadily lost value, with the government using inflation as a hidden tax on its citizens. The removal of gold and silver from currency allowed the government to manipulate the money supply without any checks on its power. Every dollar printed makes the dollars in your pocket worth a little less. Inflation, the hidden tax on you. Inflation may seem like a normal part of life, but it's actually a form of taxation. Every time the government prints more money, the value of your savings decreases. Your purchasing power shrinks, and it becomes harder to maintain your standard of living. The government can blame rising costs or economic conditions, but the truth is that inflation is a direct result of currency debasement. While politicians keep you distracted with meaningless arguments, whether it's Democrats versus Republicans, social issues, or endless debates, the real theft is happening in plain sight. The government debases the currency, creates inflation, and robs you of your wealth while you're too distracted to notice. The Federal Reserve, a private institution with the power to print money at will, has engineered an economy where inflation benefits the government at your expense. You work hard, save your money, and try to get ahead, but inflation erodes your wealth year after year. Meanwhile, the political class and their allies in big business profit from this system, using inflation to bail out banks, fund government programs, and prop up an economy that's teetering on the edge. Distraction and division. The government's ultimate weapon. How does the government get away with this hidden theft? The answer is simple: distraction. Politicians and the media keep you focused on meaningless debates. Whether it's left versus right, cultural issues, or social controversies, the goal is always the same: keep you divided. While the country is busy fighting over partisan politics, the real crime is happening right in front of you. The government devalues the currency, taxes you through inflation, and distracts you with political theater. It's a brilliant strategy: divide and conquer. Instead of asking why your dollar buys less every year, people are too busy picking sides in a political game that benefits only the ruling class. The more we fight amongst ourselves, the easier it is for the government to continue debasing the currency and stealing our wealth. Conclusion: currency debasement is the ultimate control. Currency debasement is an age-old tactic that allows governments to fund their operations without directly taxing their citizens. But make no mistake, inflation is a tax. The US government, like so many before it, is using this tactic to slowly rob you of your wealth. Whether it's ancient Rome, medieval kings, or modern central banks, the strategy is always the same: devalue the currency, create inflation, and distract the population with political division. The next time you see your grocery bill rise or watch the price of everyday goods increase, remember, this is no accident. It's by design. The government is not your friend. It's using inflation as a tool to take advantage of you while keeping you distracted with endless political theater. It's time to open your eyes.